Order, please rise for Mayor Michael Fougere.
Please be seated. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the July 30th meeting of Regina City Council. If I could start with the confirmation of the agenda. Thank you. A seconder, please. Councillor Barchiani. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The minutes for the last meeting. Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Barchiani, you have the floor.
Thank you. I would just like to clarify for the record, on last council meeting, further to the minutes, last month's council meeting, I did remove myself for CR 18-69 as a family member has a hold in the towns on a piece of property that could impact, by the decision of council. So I just want to make it for the record that I did remove myself at that time.
Duly noted. Thank you, Councillor Barchiani.
Thank you.
You've seconded the motion. Any other discussion on the minutes from the last meeting? Councillor Young?
Did you ask for a second?
Councillor Barchiani seconded. Yes. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll go to delegations, advertising, public notice and bylaws. This first report is on a road right-of-way adjustment to 4239 Dudney Avenue. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much. If I could have a second, I'll speak to this.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you. So this is a very small strip of land. It's right on the corner of Louvain and Dudney. There's already a parking lot there. It is actually an area that is already asphalted. If you live in the west end of town, you may have stopped there and bought BC fruit. That's exactly where it sits. There is a request from the landowner to purchase this property, but the city retains holding rights on this should we need it for roadway work. Seek concurrence on this, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Any discussion on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The next issue we have here is with Harbour Landing, and this is a proposed zoning bylaw amendment. Jana Hutton is here for questions only, as her report says, not here to make a formal presentation. Is it the wish of members of council to have Ms. Hutton come forward? Okay, so that's good. You can stand down then. Councillor O'Donnell, you want to bring forward the report? This is 18-73.
Thanks. From Regina Planning Commission, it's a zoning bylaw amendment application, urban holding to direct control district and R5 residential multiple housing in Harbour Landing Phase 6, Stage 3B. If I could have a seconder, please.
Seconder, please. Councillor Young.
Thanks very much. So what happened was there was a very small piece of property that was being held by the Ministry of Highways just off Campbell Street and basically near Highway number 1. And it is no longer needed. So the RM of Sherwood and the City of Regina came to a decision that we would bring that property back into the city. And now Dream would like to put some single-family housing on there. Saw no issue with this. Seek concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Discussion or debate? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. The next communication we have is from Terra Developments, and this is a communication, not a delegation. So I have a motion to receive and file the letter. Councillor Barchiani, you're going to just receive and file only. And a seconder for that, please. Okay. Councillor Bryce, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Barchiani.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will remove myself. Are we moving into the next?
Yes, we're moving to the
okay.
report 74.
Okay, perfect. Yeah. So again, as a conflict of interest, I have a close family member who has a hold on property in the towns that could be impacted by the decision. So I will declare a conflict and I will remove myself.
Thank you, Councillor Barchiani. We'll wait till you leave the room, and I'll give the floor to Councillor O'Donnell in just a moment. Councillor O'Donnell on the amendments to the town's concept plan and related zoning amendments.
Thank you. Could I have a second? I'll speak to it, please.
Second. Councillor Massanelli.
Thanks very much. So there's a change that's requested here. Actually, what it will be two bays that will be created for single-family housing as compared to what was planned for high-density housing. There'll be a slight amendment to the park that is in the area as well. That is, it'll be slightly smaller, and that is because the drainage system can be handled by a linear park that's slightly to the east. So no issue with this. Seek concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor Dowell. Are there other speakers to the report? Councillor Findura.
Thank you, Worship. If you allow me, I just have a question. This question is on the road, not necessarily on the zoning or
The land use is more
land
of a-
use or that. So, if you allow me, the question is, I know that a lot of the planning has been going on since probably 1992. I've had quite a few questions posed to me asking about Erin's Road, Buckingham, and all the roads extending out towards Anaquad or out to Chuka. And the question is posed, the reasoning behind that. So if I can get a comment or something from the administration to you, Your Worship.
Find out, Ms. Harlock.
Through your worship, the city has done a number of different planning studies dating back all the way to 1992 about the road networks within this area. And most recently through our official community plan and our transportation master plan that was done between 2012 to 2017, it was noted that these roads would need to be expanded in order to accommodate growth. And this is found within the Southeast Neighborhood Plan that was approved by council and also the town's concept plan.
Okay, and just one more. Has there been consultations out there with residents? Has this been talked about? Because I hear again saying that I didn't hear about this. I just bought a house this time. I didn't know anything about this.
Ms. Harlock.
How do we answer that?
Through your worship, through the official community plan, there was a public consultation, the transportation master plan, the Southeast Neighborhood Plan, and this concept plan all had opportunities for public input before they were approved by council, and all of those showed what the long-term plans were for the road networks.
Okay, and the final question about the woodland growth. That's the comments been made that the woodland will be twinned. Is that what the plans are?
Ms. Harlock.
Through your worship, that's right. It will be expanded, and it will be expanded as development continues to take place in that area. It will be the responsibility of the developer to widen that road. I can't give you an exact date, but it's as development will continue, we'll negotiate with the developer to make the expansions that are necessary for woodland.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Findura. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. Just some questions for administration and the Planning Commission as well. Just so I'm reading this correct, we're moving from a high-density zoning to lower-density residential zoning. Is that correct? When the initial concept was approved, was it approved on the condition that it would include this high-density residential zoning?
Ms. Harlock.
Through your worship, it was. Our main focus is keeping the hectares of persons per hectare, and this plan does maintain that number.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. In terms of prospective municipal revenues we would generate from a high-density unit versus the lower-density residential, what does that mean in terms of the tax revenue we may be forfeiting, or maybe we're now making more off of this zoning change?
Ms. Harlock.
Through your worship, I can't really give you an exact number because its assessment is based on the units. Obviously, with higher densities, you'll get more tax revenues. But of course, it's over the whole area. Yeah. And in this case, we've seen it go both ways, from low density to medium. And so this fluctuates. I think the bigger thing is that it is keeping the numbers that we want. So overall, we should be still within those ranges.
Thank you. Why the change? Why are we now seeing a rezoning to less dense residential?
Ms. Harlock.
Through your worship, I think there is a market change and there's demand for a lower density housing type. With the two bays, it is going to provide a different, from a safety perspective, having the bays, not having as many housing backing onto or fronting onto that roadway provides that. And then the opportunity with the park having a different solution from a servicing perspective gave the opportunity to allow additional types of housing along that park.
Thank you. Correct me if I'm wrong here. The city of Regina has some land holdings in the vicinity, correct?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, these lands are the city-owned lands.
Okay, the ones that we're seeing rezoned.
That's right.
Okay, and could you give an estimate perhaps on what this means in terms of revenue to the city once this is developed and brought online?
Through
Ms.
your
Harlock?
worship, that's really not at a planning, and it's not my area. I think a report would be coming forward to report on the financials of the development in the future.
Terrific. Thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Councillor Stevens? Councillor Flagel?
Thank you. At the very bottom of one of the pictures, it says Green Bank Road, and then these new bays back onto that. So would this be the first part of the towns on this section of the towns? Because I know we're building a few houses east of this. So I got Green Bank Road, and then I go to Jasmine Place and Kinloch Bay. This is the first section? I don't have a number. I don't have a drawing number.
Ms. Harlock?
Appendix E. Just want to make sure that.
Through your worship, this is already within the first phase development, so there is a lot more development that's already taken place around this area.
But this is the first, what I'm trying to get at, this is the first piece directly in line with the greens on that south.
Oh,
Harlock?
you mean to the
This
the
butts
south?
up against
Yeah.
the end of greens, right?
No, the Primrose Green Drive would be.
Oh, Primrose does,
Yeah.
okay. Okay. So going forward, what else does this do to anything commercial on this side of the towns? Are we dealing with any of that tonight? Just for
Ms. Harlock? This is residential only for
Yeah.
density.
Through
Ms.
your
Harlock?
worship, tonight is just about this residential
Okay.
rezoning.
Just a comment about this, and maybe a little bit to Councillor Stevens, is sometimes less density creates more volume in dollars for us because they're higher priced houses, and it's all based on assessment. Years ago, when we got into this with our companies that we're working with, there was, and it'd be interesting to know when this report's going to come out, that if I remember correctly, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of a profit of $27 million to the city of Regina for the lands, total lands of the towns. And I'll be curious to know if we're slowly getting on track for that number, if that number is going to change because the market's changed. So are we talking a month, 6 months from now for this report?
Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, I've been told the report will be to council in October.
October. Okay, good. Yeah, that's it for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Other discussion on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll wait for Councillor Bresciani to come back in. If someone could let her know. Councillor Stevens, I'll give you the floor for this, but I ask that you move, receive, and file on bylaw 37. That is an older version of the cannabis bylaw, so we'll do that one first, then go to the rest of them. So I'll give the floor to you.
Thank you. I move, seconded by Councillor Bresciani, that bylaw 2018-37 be received and filed.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. You want to continue on? The other bylaws, Councillor Stevens?
Bylaw 28-41, the Regina Zoning Amendment Bylaw 2018 number 18. I move, seconded by Councillor Young, that bylaw 2018-41 be introduced and read a first time.
All those in favor? Okay. Mr. Clark?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Your Worship. Council will now consider a bylaw to permit cannabis retail stores throughout Regina. And I would ask if there is anyone in the gallery who wishes to address council on this matter, that you indicate your interest at this time. There appears to be no one, Your Worship.
Thank you. We'll move on to second reading. Duly noted, Councillor Hawkins, of your opposition to first reading. Councillor Stevens, on second reading, please.
I move, seconded by Councillor Findura, that bylaw 2018-41 be read a second time.
All those in favor? Okay, before we take the vote, Councillor Hawkins.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. I have consistently expressed concern about this regulation. The nature of my concern is that I do not feel it goes far enough to protect young people at a time when marijuana is on the eve of being legalized. I just want to give the three reasons why I feel strongly this way. The first is, I think with the legalization of marijuana, we are taking a step towards normalizing drug taking in our society, and I think that's very problematic. The second is, I believe that marijuana for many young people will create dependencies and will be a gateway drug and induce young people into taking harder drugs, and that's a problem for me too. And the third thing is, I accept the Canadian Pediatric Society's view that up until the age of 25, the brains of young adults are still developing, and that marijuana can have an adverse and negative effect on the development of their mental capacities. This regulation is designed to protect and shield young people from all of those concerns. We proposed a 1-block buffer for schools. A 2-block buffer was proposed and defeated. We proposed at one point that there be a discretionary use for marijuana shops in the downtown area, and that was defeated. So I simply don't feel that this bylaw, this regulation, goes far enough in protecting our young people from marijuana use at a time when they're vulnerable and the availability of marijuana will be increased. I believe that we put commerce before kids in this regard. So for those reasons, I will vote against this bylaw on second reading and will decline to support it for unanimous third reading tonight. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. We're going to vote on second reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Stevens?
I move, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell, that Council hereby consents to bylaw 2018-41 going to third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? The bylaw is carried over until the next council meeting at the end of August. Councillor Stevens, you want to do the next two bylaws? Next three bylaws?
Thank you. This relates to bylaws 2018-38, 39, and 40. I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that bylaws 38, 39, and 40 be introduced and read a first time.
One of these, Councillor Bashani, you may declare conflict on. I'm not sure which one this is, so Mr. Clerk? 218-38, you may want to just reference that.
Let's do the others.
Sure.
Okay, let's do 39 and 40 then.
Okay, so just to clarify, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that bylaws 2018-39 and 40 be introduced and read a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council, having considered the following reports, will now consider these following bylaws. Number 218-39, respecting proposed amendments to accommodate low and medium residential lots in the Harbour Landing neighbourhood, and 218-40, respecting the closure of a portion of the right-of-way adjacent to 4239 Dudney Avenue. If anyone in the gallery wishes to address council on either of these proposed bylaws, I would ask that you indicate your interest at this time. There is no one, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'll call the vote on first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Stevens?
I move, seconded by Councillor Mancinelli, that bylaws 2018-39 and 40 be read a second time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Bryce, that Council hereby consents to bylaws 2018-39 and 40 going to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Oh, yes, all those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Bresciani. Sorry. That bylaws 28-39 and 40 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councilor Bresciani, this is now the bylaw.
I declare conflict. I will recuse myself.
Thank you for that.
Off the fence. Watch it. It's electrified.
Councilor Stevens.
I move, seconded by Councillor Hawkins, that bylaw 2018-38 be introduced and read a first time.
Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council will now consider bylaw 218-38 respecting the proposed rezoning to accommodate residential developments within the towns. Again, if there's anyone in the audience who wishes to address council at this time, I would ask you to indicate your interest. There is no one, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. I'll call the vote on the first reading. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Mancinelli, that bylaw 2018-38 be read a second time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Bryce, that council hereby consents to bylaw 2018-38 going to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Young, that bylaw 2018-38 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Councillor Stevens. I'll wait for Councillor Bresciani to get back to her seat. So we'll move on to delegation and related reports. The first item is for the proposed Coopertown concept plan. I'd ask for Mr. Jason Carlson to please come forward. Mr. Carlson, if you could tell us who you represent, who's with you. You have 5 minutes for your presentation, and there may be questions afterwards.
Great, thank you, Worship. I'm Jason Carlston. I'm here with Catherine Godwin. We're from Dream Developments, and we're happy to be here to speak to the item before you tonight. First, would send some kudos and thanks to the administration for the work on this application. Particular thanks to Jeremy Fenton for quarterbacking the process, and to Jeff Brown and his team for the review, input, and design suggestions, which I think have made the plan better. The concept plan before you tonight represents the next level of planning related to the larger Coopertown neighborhood plan, which was approved in April of 2017. The neighborhood plan establishes the policies for an area that will ultimately accommodate a population in the range of 35,000 people over the next 30 plus years. The concept plan encompasses an area of 160 acres and is approved within the phase 1 of the growth plan within the OCP, meaning that the development of this land in the near term is required to achieve growth goals of the OCP. So in terms of development timing, with concept plan approval, Dream would then undertake detailed design, rezoning, subdivision, and in 2019 we would aim to service the lands and create lots and parcels for home builders with an aim of a launch in 2020. First housing occupancy is either late 2020 or sometime in 21. And despite being a couple of years away from occupancy or construction, there's already interest from housing providers and retailers to be part of the neighborhood. We've been working with a seniors housing provider, multifamily builder, a rental housing developer, and several prospective retailers and a number of home builders related to their participation within this area. In terms of consultation, Dream participated in the public engagement noted in the administration's report, and we made changes to the plan based on feedback at those sessions. So notably, the public expressed excitement towards the proposed retail site, particularly a grocery store, but they did have some concern with the extent of commercial development oriented along Courtney Street. In response to that, we've changed the plan and now oriented the commercial parcel along Rink Avenue, thereby reducing frontage along Courtney. There were also questions raised about traffic on Courtney. The development of Coopertown represents an opportunity for upgrading of infrastructure, and as noted in the report, the developer will be responsible for improvements to Courtney as development progresses, including actions such as widening the road, adding turning lanes, adding traffic signals and such. There was also some excitement expressed by the public around the new park spaces that would be added within this area. We're very proud of the neighborhood design that you see before you today. We employed Calthorpe Associates, a leading planning firm that specializes in new urbanist communities, supported by AECOM locally, to lead the design work. And through the process, the plans seemed to evolve and improve as we worked with both the consultant and city staff. At a high level, just a few elements of the neighborhood's design worth noting include a large centralized park with multi-use field, 2 pocket parks, one which will have adjacent housing that will be fronting the park, a density gradient that decreases away from the central park and away from the commercial site, mixed-use commercial residential along Rank Avenue, 2 roundabouts which are an effective free-flowing traffic control, a full range of dwelling types ranging from smaller apartment units, seniors housing, up to larger single detached homes on wide shallow lots. And the vast majority of streets will have lanes, which assists in providing more on-street parking space and results in a nicer streetscape. And all streets will be wide enough to accommodate parking on both sides. Although not subject to this approval, I believe it's worth recognizing that DREAM will also be implementing a number of operational measures to ensure a quality neighborhood. For instance, we have a 3-tiered system of architectural codes that our builders must adhere to for community aesthetic. DREAM reviews and approves the lot grading prior to construction, as Regina is one of the few cities that does not provide this service at building permit. And DREAM requires builders to build a parking pad or garage access from the lane at time of housing construction to accommodate parking. And we also have a landscape requirement of builders, which is reinforced through a deposit system. Development of the concept plan will also benefit service provision in the larger area. Infrastructure construction will facilitate wastewater trunk line to Rosewood Park neighborhood, which will provide them the opportunity for a permanent wastewater solution for all of their 160 acres. This and other Coopertown infrastructure will also enable the City of Regina to decommission the Maple Ridge lift station and potentially the West Hill lift station, benefiting residents in those areas that are currently underserved. Overall, the plan was guided by and is consistent with the policies in the OCP and all of its related documents that were used. And as such, the concept plan is very similar in standing and design features, really, with other Phase 1 neighborhoods, including Westera, the Towns, Rosewood Park, all of which are required to achieve the growth plans and goals within the OCP. And that's everything. Thank you.
Thank you. You're right on time. Thank you very much for that. Are there any questions? Councillor Young?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your presentation this evening. I'm going to ask you the same thing I asked you at Planning Commission. One of the things you mentioned was in the residential areas, the single-family residential areas, that you're building wide, shallow lots, which are very similar to some of the legacy neighborhoods like Whitmore Park and Hillsdale. So could you speak a little bit about why you have done that?
Certainly. I think the combination, we've got quite a range of product types, and going back to some wider, shallow provides for a better streetscape. So although most of the streets will have lanes, which provides for a nice streetscape in itself, and that there's no driveway crossings in the front and provides more parking. So that would be more like the Cathedral neighborhoods or Lakeview, some of the smaller lotted neighborhoods.
Yes.
But the wide shallows might have front crossings. So by having a wider lot, it still provides opportunity to have a front yard, and that the streetscape itself isn't just simply garages that are protruding out from the house. Which also provides more on-street parking and just a better aesthetic.
Okay,
so I think you had said, Councillor Young had said at Planning Commission, sort of likened it to some of those older neighborhoods, which we were very pleased to hear, because some of the guiding principles in terms of visioning and creating Coopertown related to it being sort of timeless in design.
Okay, and could you speak a bit about landscaping? What did you mean by that?
Yes, through your worship, DREAM has a landscaping program that we've implemented recently in Eastbrook. So we didn't have it in Harbor Landing, but in Eastbrook now we take a deposit from builders, and we require the builders, to ensure that their purchasers, the residents, whether it's through the builder or the resident, implement landscaping within their front yard within, I think it's about a year of occupancy. So by the following October, after things have settled and they've had an opportunity to get into the house, that the yard is landscaped. If it's not landscaped, then we can use the deposit to enact that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor O'Donnell?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Welcome. And let's just flush out a few more things, because you said a few interesting parts. Not everybody knows where Northwest Regina is. So the first phase of development occurs where, please?
Yes, through your worship, the larger Coopertown area is at the intersection of 9th Avenue North and Courtney Street. So everything to the west and north of that area is the Coopertown neighborhood plan area, and our first phase is in the very southeast corner at Courtney and 9th Avenue intersection, and our primary entrance for the first phase is Rink Avenue, so an extension of Rink to the west.
Thanks very much. So you made reference to Courtney Street, which has been a bit of a topic in the last while because of the school situation out there busing. Could you maybe talk a little bit about when you would think that phasing would occur based on what you would be responsible for?
Right, through your worship, both Rosewood and Dream, who will be developing along Courtney, when development occurs, will be responsible for providing the initial upgrades to Courtney. So if we're looking at a 2020-2021 construction, it would be around the same time frame.
Good, thanks for that. Find it interesting that you're talking about roundabouts. And so first of all, is roundabouts going to be something that we would see all the way through Coopertown beyond this first phase? Is that a plan for you?
Through your worship, it is a plan. Within this phase, we're proposing 2 and we'll be implementing 2. That'll also provide us time for both residents to become accustomed to them. Although relatively new to Regina, they're sort of widespread in other cities, but it's something that they can become accustomed to, so that would be able to use throughout Coopertown.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. A phrase that you used at Planning Commission was the Main Street effect as Rochdale eventually extends to the west. Can you comment on that, please?
Yes, Your Worship. So the urban center, which is visible in the larger neighborhood plan just north of this phase along Rochdale, is envisioned both in city policy and what we've been working on as the sort of the major spine or highest activity area and most eclectic activity area within Coopertown. So what I mean by that is, in addition to having commercial or retail uses, it's also going to have the office uses, provided there's a market for office and we meet the office policies. There's opportunity to develop an office park, other types of employment. This is where we would likely have the major sort of plaza or park space for gathering. This would be the highest diversity area, and it's an extension of Rochdale, which was envisioned previously as sort of the main street of the Northwest, and is also identified for a rapid transit in the future.
Thanks for mentioning that last one. So just a little bit about transit and realizing full well that council has to approve the extension of transit, but what's the plan for the area, please?
There are 2 routes, through your worship, there are 2 routes that are planned, so they would basically continue into Coopertown from the existing Northwest.
So from the existing area to the east, it would just come through?
Correct, yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks very much. It's good for me.
Thank you, Councillor Donald. Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for coming forward. I have 3 questions. The first is a follow-up from Councillor Young's question about landscaping requirements. Can you tell us a little bit what a landscaping requirement is and why you, as a major developer in Regina, feel that these requirements are important? And I ask this in light of the fact that council will be discussing landscaping requirements in the next little while.
Yes, through your worship. It was basically a learning from past development in other neighborhoods, in that some residents or builders, whomever, choose to do the landscaping up front within the front yard, but some households wouldn't. So it sort of takes away from the community aesthetic, and I think there's certain expectations that there'd be some consistency. So this is our way of ensuring a level of consistency in terms of landscaping early within the development process.
Thank you very much. Helpful. The second question is similar. You mentioned 3-tiered system of architectural codes. Again, could you tell us what an architectural code is and why you as a developer feel this is important?
Yes, Your Worship. Architectural codes are used to create some sort of theme or feel within the community and create some consistency and some flow of design for the community aesthetic. So what we've done is establish 3 tiers based on location within the neighborhood. So some of the gateway locations that have the highest requirement of architecturals. And what our codes look like is a collection of different types of elevations and styles, architectural styles, that can be utilized on different blocks. And then we also have sort of a limitation in terms of how many can be used adjacent to each other and within a block face. So it's highly regulated from our perspective.
And both with respect to architectural codes and landscaping requirements, if the city goes into consultation on these matters, would you Dream be prepared to come forward and explain what its experience has been in these areas?
Your Worship, absolutely would be happy to share with the administration or council our experience. I will say on the landscape, it's relatively new for us, so we're still implementing it in Eastbrook, so we're very early in the process. We haven't had to exercise the use of the security deposit yet.
Thank you very much. And one last question. You mentioned the decommissioning of the Maple Ridge lift station, which is an important development. Can you say a little more about how your plans will facilitate that?
I can, Your Worship, certainly I can mention something in further detail. We can talk to our engineer here. But essentially, Rosewood currently goes into the existing Maple Ridge lift station, which you can ask more of the administration, but is mostly at capacity. And through our plan, all of the services are generally coming from the south. So stormwater will be going south to the creek, and the sanitary wastewater also will be going south to a lift station that we'll be constructing. So we'll be building, along with Rosewood and the city, a trunk line that will extend up, I think, Silverleaf Boulevard through the center of our Phase 1 area, straight north to Rosewood. So that would enable them to tie into this system to service their 160 acres.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. Welcome back. I just want to look on Appendix E here. I need to go into this. It shows the line going from Rochdale south on Courtney to 9th Avenue North, and there's a lot of white space between that and the road map of sorts. What are you planning for that? Because I can't quite read if it's going to be office, low, medium, and high density residential, or density residential office mixed use. According to the white, is that white, gray, green? I can't read the color. So that spot from Courtney going, it would be Courtney going west, before any houses.
Right.
What's in there?
Through Your Worship, that white area is the Courtney Street right-of-way, and there's a lot of land being reserved for a future interchange. Okay. So those are interchange lands.
So nothing, you guys are putting nothing in that kind of half rectangle space?
Right. At the most, there'd be some landscaping to ensure just
Okay.
Yeah.
So along the, is there going to be a perimeter fence like there is in Lakeridge, a concrete fence or a wood fence along the peripheral of the whole Coopertown, or what's the design going to be?
So through Your Worship, there will be a fence along property line. In terms of the buffer or within the right-of-way, that's still to be determined with the administration.
Okay. Just to give me a rough idea, you say 160 acres, through you, Mr. Mayor, you say 160 acres for this piece. Is it for this piece, or is this for the whole Coopertown?
Through Your Worship, that's for this Phase 1, so just this piece.
Okay, I wanted to make sure.
The whole of Coopertown is close to 2,000.
2,000. So, in perspective, how big is Lakeridge? Do you know? What's the acres?
That's Lakeridge, Your Worship, is probably one section of land, so 640.
Okay, so it's 4 times. Lakeridge is 4 times as big as this piece, roughly.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
just so people get an understanding how big this is going to be. So if this all goes forward, when do you want to start, and when would the first resident be living in Coopertown?
Through Your Worship, there's a number of steps yet to take. We'd be back here in front of council with a rezoning application at some point, maybe in the early new year. And if all goes well, we would look at servicing, so installing the undergrounds and roads and so forth next year. And then in 2020 would be the first opportunity really for construction and occupancy, either late 2020 or 2021.
Just so we have an idea.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Other questions of the delegation? There are no more. Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery, and we'll now look at the proposed Coopertown concept plan. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you. I can have a second.
Seconder, please. Councillor Hawkins.
Thanks very much. So as through the questions, I think people understand what we're talking about. Earlier, we saw the very, very large plan for Coopertown, the overall general, and now we have an actual place that needs to get built, and you heard the timeline. There are some very key points, I think, to what's going on here. One, this is now one of the neighborhoods of which we have, I believe it's 3, that are following the official community plan based on public engagement to what people want to see for complete neighborhoods. So while you heard things like a variety of housing and a variety of commercial and park space and so on, it is following a plan that people have told us to do. So I think perhaps there's some other people that might ask some specific questions. I simply want to make a couple comments. One is about the notion of servicing in the area. Well, you heard that it will solve and work with what's going on in Rosewood. What it will also do is solve a problem that is occurring in West Hill in terms of lift stations. Now, in the area that I represent, most of the sewage in the city goes through a station that we have on McCarthy. This is the first time it's going to actually not do that. It's going to go right out to the treatment plant. So that's rather unique. But I guess when you're having the potential for 35,000 people, I'm going to say that again. You're going to have the city of Moose Jaw planted in Northwest Regina at some point in time. You need to do some things a little bit differently. And my last comment that I'll make is this. It's not entirely up to the city of Regina how all of this develops. I would suggest if we're looking at a notion where we're going to add another city of 35,000 to a corner, we have to start having conversations today about whether there's a hospital there, how many schools and where they are, and what other amenities that people would want in a very expanding, very nice area of the city. And I think that has to be part of the conversation here. We obviously seek concurrence on this, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Other speakers to the report? Councillor Bryce? Councillor Stevens, sorry.
Okay. Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. I had a chance to go back to the overall Coopertown concept plan, look specifically at this neighborhood plan, spoke with Mr. Carlson earlier about this specific proposal. It seems exciting. In the past, I've raised some concerns about, or rather a question about how we're charting out this growth pace for growth. So you can kind of anticipate my line of questioning here in terms of the financial implications. If we read the report, like many other reports that come from the Planning Commission, it talks about SAFs, infrastructure, but typically silent on operational expenses. So I want to push this a bit more. I know the answer, but I have some direction where I want to take this. I understand that administration is supposed to be coming back in 2021, 2022 with, if you will, a methodology for costing concept and neighborhood plans. Am I correct in that?
Ms. Harlock?
That's correct.
Great, thank you. So my concern here is actually going ahead with something as beautiful as it looks until I have more information. That's my reservation, because the big issue has been making sure that growth pays for growth. And second, we have a bit of an information deficit when it comes to these neighborhood plans. So by comparison, when I'd asked for the Southeast neighborhood plan through an undertaking to give me a rough estimate of the costing, and I'm very thankful for administration's work on that. I know it wasn't easy. This is some of the findings. I'll read it. The estimated annual revenue analysis is $32.1 million, and the cost is $17.7 million, resulting in a net positive balance of $15.4 million. Great, positive. I like that. But there are some notable differences in the Southeast neighborhood plan which don't exist here, and I'll read further from the report. The SENP differs from other neighborhoods in Regina, the Coopertown plan, the Harbor Landing, in several ways. One, it includes a significant amount of industrial land uses within the Chuka Creek Business Park. It is serviced by infrastructure which is not maintained by the City of Regina. And third, some local infrastructure is permitted to be maintained privately. So would it be fair to say that if we took that out, Coopertown could feasibly be in a position to not be net positive without the industrial land and the infrastructure serviced and operated by third parties?
Pretty hard to answer that on the fly like that right now, or Councillor
Even
Stevens.
a speculation would
But I'd
be
ask you to keep your comments to Coopertown, not to Southeast Plan. Just keep the distinction that the report tonight is only on Coopertown. Ms. Harlock?
Through your worship, obviously we want to look at the complete neighborhoods, and it is hard to speculate because as the plans build out, we get more refined plans that will give us better ideas, and then we can project it out. Definitely the report that indicated the industrial does give that, but as a city of a whole, you have to look at the whole city. If we actually just looked at some of our existing neighborhoods right now and did an analysis, they wouldn't actually be cost recovery because they don't have all of that. So from a city perspective, we want to make sure that we have a balance of residential and commercial that will balance itself out throughout the whole city. So like an 80-20 split is great, or 70-30. That's really what, as a city, we should be achieving to ensure that we have the right balance of residential and industrial.
Thank you. I understand the balance. And as an interesting side point, but related, one of the delegations talking about the road renewal discussion item later hinted at the fact that we're growing, we're building new roads, and yet some roads have deteriorated. So I'm starting to see this in the same conversation. So I'd like to promote a referral motion. That administration return with a high-level assessment that identifies the operational costs and potential municipal revenues from both the concept and the neighborhood plan. The Coopertown concept and neighborhood plan.
Councillor Stevens, are you referring this report back as well?
That's the whole report.
Okay.
And to return to council with that assessment.
Okay. This is a referral motion. It's not debatable. Does everyone understand what is being referred to here? Madam Deputy Clerk, could you read that again? Just as you. Could you read?
Yeah.
Just read it.
Sorry. Do you have my microphone? Sorry. That administration return with a high-level assessment that identifies the operational costs and municipal revenues from...
Yeah, that's my writing, all right.
A concept neighborhood plan?
From Coopertown concept and neighborhood plan.
Perhaps you can type it up first then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
let's do that.
sorry.
Just as a moment as we were trying to get the motion down formally, just so we could bear with us here. Fix your penmanship there, Councillor Stevens.
Typing and Coopertown concept.
Do you have two widths up there as well in the first line? So we can all read the motion before us. It's not debatable. So I'm going to call the question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion is defeated. No other speakers on this report. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So we'll move on to our next bit of business here, the Residential Road Renewal Program. We have two delegations. First delegation is Mr. Brian Black. Brian Black. Mr. Black, if you could identify yourself for the record, who you represent. You have 5 minutes for your presentation. There may be questions afterwards.
Okay. Thank you. I'm Brian Black, a resident and taxpayer of South Regina. I serve on 2 local community association boards as Director of Community Issues for the Hillsdale Community Association and as Vice President for the Whitmore Park Community Association. I'm here today as a delegate for both of those organizations, plus our friends and neighbors. I'd like to thank the people in the gallery tonight for coming out tonight to support Hillsdale and Whitmore Park. Good to see you out here. I want to compliment the City of Regina for their positive efforts related to establishing an enhanced residential road renewal program with our extra tax dollars we have provided in recent years. I'm not sure of all the reasons why our community's roads and related infrastructure has been so extremely neglected over the decades since they were built. When I mention the word neglect, I'm referring to the fact that in our Ward 1 area of the city, we are number 1 for poor roads, the very worst roads in Regina. A map prepared by the City of Regina to display road conditions verifies this fact. Close to 80% of the roads in our community are colored red, which means that they are classified as poor roads. Out of all the poor roads in Regina, we have 52% of them. The map shows in 2015 there were 107 kilometers of poor roads in Regina. Ward 1 would have close to 56 kilometers of poor roads. As a community representative, I have people telling me that they are concerned about the safety of the roads. Their children would rather bicycle on the sidewalks than risk falling off their bicycles on the rutted, potholed, crumbling streets. Vehicle owners have told me that they've had substantial damages occur to their wheel alignment, oil pans, and undercarriages as a result of driving on the terrible streets we have to deal with 24/7. On Riddell Crescent, a resident of the street told me that sinkholes have appeared on his street as well. People have to deal with the pooling of rainwater on their streets for very long periods of time because of the sunken areas on the road. Waterfowl have been seen swimming in them. The Residential Road Renewal Program report requested by Councillor Young in 2016 and provided to this council meeting by the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee is quite disappointing for a number of reasons. First of all, Appendix B, Option 3 suggests with some minor funding, the current backlog of poor roads being approved will take 32 years. That is without considering cost escalation or deterioration. So yes, much longer than that. Appendix B1, the recommended Option 2 reduces the time to address the backlog of poor roads from 64 years with a current budget allocation ratio to 36 years without considering cost escalation or network deterioration. Appendix C indicates a mediocre change to the state of roads after 25 years of work on poor roads with any of the 3 options provided. The goal of 85% fair or better condition only met with increased spending. Why not Option 4? Use some additional funding to correct the problem in a shorter period of time. What we'd like to see from the city is a 15-year plan that focuses entirely on the remediation of the poor roads in Regina and a more focused strategic plan for pothole repairs and maintenance. We think this is only fair since our tax dollars from our community over the last 60+ years have largely been applied to supporting the design and construction of other residential roads in the city. It also has the benefit of people wanting to continue living in our community instead of selling or renting their house and then purchasing a home on a street in the city with better conditions and improved market value. I noticed that the city's website area labeled infrastructure investment states that the city is investing in its infrastructure to ensure sustainable service delivery now and into the future. Over the next 5 years, the city is looking to invest over $580 million in its 5-year plan
You have 1 minute to go in your time.
to renew our aging infrastructure. Our neighborhood streets are worn out and a lot of the related infrastructure is overdue for replacement. The city indicates the proposed 2018 street repair budget allocation is only a mere $12.3 million, and for 2019 it is listed as a mere $14 million for all types of street repairs with no further projected funds being spent. I don't really understand how these city-operated service buildings are so much more important than repairing and replacing the streets that all of the taxpayers and their families in the city use every day for driving and walking on. We want equivalent streets to what other taxpayers are enjoying. It's my opinion that the $580 million service buildings should be put on hold until we have some decent roads to travel on. The request of ours corresponds to the official community plan bylaw number 2013-48, which has stated that one of its objectives is to improve the development and maintenance of livable neighborhoods while improving the residential road infrastructure condition to a level and quality that is sustainable. We request that this objective be met by allocating a significantly greater amount of money to our neglected poor residential roads. Thank you for letting me speak to you today on this very critical topic.
Thank you, Mr. Black. Order, please. I'd ask that you please not. I know this is an important issue, but I'd ask the delegate or the gallery to please not participate in the discussion. I'd please ask you to do that for decorum. Thank you very much. Are there questions of the delegation? There are none. Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery. Oh, you got to get your... Councillor
Couldn't
Young.
get my button pressed.
Got to get your
fast
button
enough.
quick. Councillor Young.
Thank you for coming. I am curious about the 15 years. How did you come up with the 15 years as a goal?
Well, the 5 and 10 have been used, and I figured 15 is probably a reasonable period of time, considering that it's a long period of time we're going to have to look at repairing these roads. We've waited a good number of decades here with no work done on them whatsoever. I'm throwing 15 out as just a number that I feel would be reasonable to deal with. People have some hope that their streets are going to be repaired before they move into a retirement home or move to another part of the city. So, I mean, it's a cost projection, I guess, over 15 that we'd like to see. What's this all going to cost? I haven't seen a number attached to that. I see numbers attached to public service buildings of $580 million for 5 years. Surely we can do the same thing for roads and establish what that's going to cost to bring us up to a reasonable amount of...
So would you just clarify for a minute? You said that you haven't seen anything happen. There's been quite a bit of work done in Whitmore Park. So has that work improved?
Yes, it has. Yeah, the streets that have had work done on them since the residential road renewal program came into play, we've seen some really significant improvements. And I think there's a lot of jealous neighbors that live nearby that see the nearby roads being fixed up, and their roads remain neglected, and they just don't know when they're ever going to see similar roads occur. I think people need to recognize that it does take a lot of money and time to get these roads back to what they should be. To a fair condition of road would be nice, but at the same time, people have to be told when this is going to occur. How long do they have to wait? They see these projections in the report, 25, 30, 36, even 64 years with the current ratio that we're dealing with.
Okay.
So I would like to have the council approve some significant dollar value to our budget.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you, and thank you for coming tonight. So have you noticed any change in the potholes being filled or any maintenance at all being done on some of these roads that haven't been touched for years through your worship?
Not a significant amount.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce.
And I can just add to that too, I've phoned in different times and there's no changes made. I don't know what the system is for pothole repair. I don't see anything on the city's website regarding that. And I live in an area of the city where there's a lot of bus traffic. It goes down my street from Campbell. So we get hammered a little bit from the big wheels, and sometimes buses detour down our street. So I think the pothole thing is a big problem for a lot of our streets too, even the ones that are maybe in fair condition. Okay.
Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery and move on to our next delegation.
Okay, thanks.
Rick Ostland. Oh, watch your step. If you could identify yourself for the record, you as well have 5 minutes for your presentation, and then maybe questions afterwards.
Good evening. My name is Rick Ostland. I'm here representing the Hillsdale Community Association this evening. I too would like to thank everybody in the gallery for coming out speaking in support of this issue. I also like to thank Barbara Young, our city councillor, for encouraging me to come and attend this evening, bringing our concerns forward. And as well, a big thank you to Brian Black, Mr. Black, who's did a lot of legwork in representing both Hillsdale and Whitmore Park, legworks figuratively. I'm going to deviate from what I've written here, partly because I'm nervous, first time speaking here, but Mr. Black has said a lot of the things. But I'd like to reiterate what some of the things he said, that the road conditions, the sidewalks, the curbs, the infrastructure below the roads in Hillsdale and Whitmore Park is in significantly poor condition overall. we enjoy the boundaries of our beautiful Wascana Park and the University of Regina, and that enhances our community. Yes, you guys are, at City Council, are dealing with a great deal of cost to repair these roads, but I think it's due to our members, our in the communities, the taxpayers, if you will, that these roads and the sidewalks all need to be repaired in a more timely effort. I don't have the answer on how you're going to come up with the money, but I do know work needs to be done to put into that, to come up with a viable decision to make these better. There is a cost to each ratepayer by the degradation of the infrastructure. Our taxes go up, the new communities are being built, our home values may not be going up. Anecdotally, I would say they're probably hurting. And that's part of the due diligence we all need to do to figure out just what needs to be done. But I'd like to thank you guys for allowing me to speak this evening, and really encourage each and every one of you to look at all the older mature areas in the city and work hard to find a way to come up with a budget shortfall to address this in a timely effort. And as Brian said, 30-some years is not time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Austin, for your presentation and comments. Any questions? Councillor Young.
Thank you, Rick, for coming this evening. And so the question that I have for you is ponding. And by ponding, I mean after there's a rain or during the spring thaw, what do some of your streets look like?
Typical of a lot of older areas, there's significant potholes pop out. I'm not sure if everybody's had a chance to even drive around in some of the more drivable areas, the transition routes, as Hillsdale has lots of, and Whitmore Park. There's a lot of, the infrastructure is dropping, and some areas are raising. So our manholes, the storm sewers are the high points, and I'm not sure that's not a good thing. And so in the spring and fall and the rains, we get a lot of pooling of water in addition to the potholes. And just on the potholes, when Mr. Black was asked that question, on your encouragement, I've called into the City of Regina 777-7000 and had potholes reported. I'm not happy with the work that's been done. They do come do some repairs on them. However, they aren't lasting very long. The next spring they pop again.
Okay. Do you have sidewalks in all of your neighborhoods?
We're in one of the areas where sidewalks are on, some areas have two sidewalks, one on each side of the road. Other areas have just on one side and curbs on the other. It's the late 50s. I often, yeah.
Okay. Thank you for coming.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks very much, Mr. Mayor. And welcome. You don't have to be nervous. It's an easy gig up here. You got her down. Good.
I'm nervous.
Hey, the question was asked about Whitmore Park, and you're representing the Hillsdale people. Have you seen improvements? Have you seen new roads being built in your neighborhood?
And yes, I've lived in Hillsdale for 28 years, which is the bulk of my life. Mm-hmm. From the time we moved in, there wasn't a great deal of repairs being done in that area. Over the last 3 years, we've had in Hillsdale 2 streets being replaced. 29 years ago, when we first looked at the area, part of Bell Street was removed and replaced. The curbs in front of the house that we purchased at the time, my first house, the only house, that those curbs were replaced then. There's a few other areas that have had little minor work, but nothing significant. And one of the streets was a bus route, a major bus route, the number 4 University Hillsdale. It's the original transition street in and out of Hillsdale. Scott Street, that was replaced, and that's in large part due to transitioning traffic.
Yeah. Lake Street and all those other ones haven't been done yet?
not the full replacement, curbs, sidewalks on each side.
Yeah.
That's one of the things that's really troublesome to a lot of our neighbors. They call in. At our community association meetings, if you'll indulge me, we talk lots with our councillor Barbara Young. We also encourage the members to phone the city about the flooding and things that occur, because it's old technology that they put in place that doesn't allow for proper drainage when we get those copious amounts of rain. There's also trees. We've got beautiful trees in Hillsdale Whitmore Park. However, they do wreak havoc with the sidewalks.
Yeah.
We have a lot of sidewalks that have been repaired with asphalt over top of them. The tree roots, I'm not sure if anyone's seen that, the tree roots lift the sidewalks up. And just the last month or so, one of my neighbors down the block from me, it's probably got to the point that you can't even begin to walk on it because it's such an elevated one. And I haven't called that one in myself, but short of taking the tree out in the sidewalk, I don't know how you deal with that. These are some of the things that everybody's been tasked with.
Thanks. Okay. Something else that I was just wondering about is this 1% dedicated tax to roads has been 3 to 5 years it's been in place. Prior to that, we used to have a LIP, which was a lane improvement tax, or local improvement. Yeah, sorry.
Local improvement.
And you got a bill for $100,000. City paid 50. The residents split the bill, the other 50,000 over 10 years, each house. Do you find would that be better, or would we be better off to maybe go to a 2% dedicated to get more funding, to then maybe be able to fix more roads? What would be your preference if you had the choice?
Well, it's interesting you ask that. When we moved into Hillsdale, that was one of the decisions we were faced with. The year before we purchased our house, they had that model put in place for the curbs and half the road, because half the people, or enough of the people on the other side of the street voted it down. Our side of the street voted it in. So we got new curbs and pavement in front of our home. And that was nice. However, I was faced with 9 years of tax, that additional, I believe it was $150 to $200 a year. It's a good question. I don't have an answer to that. We've talked about it at our meetings. It's an option. I would like to see you explore that option again.
Okay.
And maybe a combination of it, because we've gotten to the point that there's a neglect of the streets over the last 30 years in our area that I know, that I'm speaking to tonight. And so now, is it fair to apply that funding model strictly based on that because of the neglect?
Right.
I think there's some onus on the city of Regina and the past councils to have to pick up some of those costs. It's kind of interesting. One of our ex-mayors used to live in that area, just down the street.
Yeah. Okay, good. Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Councillor Flagel. Councillor Stevens.
Thank you. Thanks for coming out, Rick. You'd mentioned early on that you don't have all the answers, but I think you have a lot of understanding of what's going on here. I want to ask you a bigger picture question.
Sure.
If we're thinking about not just tough decisions, but you have a finite amount of money, it doesn't grow at the pace at which it should, where do roads fit into that overall set of spending priorities? The person who was up there before, Mr. Black, had said we should stop investing for 5 years in civic buildings. That would have a consequence. So where do roads fit into your priorities? And if we are to make tough choices, one service or infrastructure project over another, what do you think should be done?
That's a good question, Councillor Stevens, and it's a tough question. I don't have a great answer other than everything's about balance. You can't just cut out one thing and neglect it for a period of time, because then you got to put extra funding into it. We got to find a way to work together and find more money. And I understand there isn't enough money to do everything, but we're at a boiling point right now where the plan going ahead isn't acceptable to the residents of not just Hillsdale, Whitmore Park, but I think as other areas degrade more, they'll want to rise up. And as we head into more economic slumps, you're going to see our $400,000 homes in Hillsdale becoming more viable than maybe some of the more expensive ones to the young people. If you look at the people in the audience here, and I've been here 28 years in Hillsdale, 28 years. Not a lot of young people out tonight, and
They look pretty young.
It's going. There's not going to be we need to get young people into our areas too, and we need to. Like if I'm looking at an area to move to, and I look at a nice new shiny area with nice new parks, curbs, and roads, and compared to Hillsdale Whitmore Park, yes, we border on the best parks in the city and the university, but when you got to drive through those to get to those places, it's a little tough at times.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stevens. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. Thank you for being here this evening. What would you say about accessibility? If I had a loved one in a wheelchair that I wanted to take a walk in your neighborhood, how would I get around?
I think you've got a little bit of the answer there. You know what? But honestly, and I answered a question mistakenly, and you brought it to my attention. So when somebody asked about what has been done, it's got to be maybe 8 to 10 years ago where there was a project put in place to start changing out a lot of the curbs, the corner curbs, to wheelchair accessible. So that has been done in some of the areas, not all of it, but some of it. However, many of the sidewalks have slumped. They've got asphalt on top of it. They've been patched. It's a patchwork for the most part. There's, in the spring and when we get rains, it's virtually, you can't take your dog for a walk on the sidewalks, let alone somebody in a wheelchair or somebody with mobility issues.
Thank you. I actually had dog walk ? Too. So do you think when people reach a point or have a loved one who is in a wheelchair or uses a walker, that's when they're thinking, I need to move out of this neighborhood because we're going to be housebound?
That's a good point. Yeah. I think that would be a definite consideration for a lot of the people.
Do you also think, through you, Your Worship, that we talked about priorities, and do you think that this is a bigger priority for specific neighborhoods who are older, like your own, and whereas the newer neighborhoods who have nice, fresh, new roads, it's not as big of a priority for them? Do you agree with that statement?
Completely.
Okay.
Yeah. I
Thank
can't
you.
disagree.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Other questions of the delegation? Thank you very much. You can return to the gallery and we'll now consider reports before us. So I'd draw members' attention to the City Manager's report. This is a supplemental report to Report 76. So I'd ask for a receive and file motion.
I'll move CR 18-76, which is the supplemental
Councillor Bryce,
report for receive and file.
We'll do
Not
the
76. I'm sorry.
Report 10.
I meant 18-10 CM.
Is receive and file?
Yes.
A seconder for that, please. Councillor Fundura. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Now the main report, which is Public Works and Infrastructure on the Residential Road Renewal Program. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. 18-76, if I can get a seconder.
Seconder for it, please. Okay. Councillor
you.
Stevens.
So this report came to Public Works, so I'll just read the motions that are in front of me. The recommendation from Public Works is that the City Council approve the redistribution of funding for the Residential Road Renewal Program from its current allocation to a new allocation of 10% good roads, 45% fair roads, and 45% poor roads. And number 2, that level 3 and 4 poor roads across the city be given preference in the maintenance such as patching and repairing of potholes. So that's the motion that came forward. We on Public Works felt, as our delegations have tonight, that it's too long to wait. When you talk about 35, 40, 76 years to wait for your road to be fixed that's already been there for 50 years, that's too long to wait. And you're paying that 1% in extra to get that road work done on the residential streets. And we just felt that it was much too long of a wait whenever you do have a poor road. So we really feel that something else needs to be done. There needs to be changes made. We need to do things differently. We need to take another look at this. The intention of the original road renewal program was to fix those poor roads. And we're not getting there with the path that we're on. So I'm just going to leave it at that. I'll close debate once we reach that point. But I'll start it off by saying that Public Works, we were very disheartened to see some of the choices that we had ahead of us, and that we also felt that they were unacceptable. So I will leave that for the debate moving forward, and then I'll close debate after.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Young.
I have an amendment to the recommendations that come with CR 1876, but I want to comment before you take it away. Number 2, that level 3 and 4 poor roads across the city be given preference in maintenance such as patching and potholes. For the time being, I'd like that to remain.
Okay.
So we can add that to the amendment.
Okay.
Okay. So would you put the amendment up? This would replace what is what the recommendations are in the report. So I would like to begin by saying that over the last 6 years that the administration and council have been looking at roads in this city, residential roads, and working to try to find solutions for them. Both waterworks and roadways and transportation have master plans, and they've done their asset management work and looked down the road, and the amount of infrastructure for both areas is huge, so we recognize that.
So let's begin by getting a seconder for your motion. That's when that's
Okay.
up there. Councillor Bryce. Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we heard tonight of some new neighborhoods that are coming in, and we've had a lot of new neighborhoods, and they would fit into that excellent road category that's been added. And when those are finished and the developer leaves and people move in, those roads become the city's responsibility. So this large network is growing every year and in need of long-range plans that deals with residential roads and their underground infrastructure, from maintenance to rebuild and repair over the life of the roads. So this amendment asks that this road network be part of long-range plans for roads and waterworks and not be dependent on just the 1% mill rate that has resulted in a fund to address roads. That fund's been used mostly for maintenance and some rebuilds. This amendment asks that residential roadways be a priority across budget areas that deal with roads and underground infrastructure. So the recommendation number 1, I'm going to talk about it. I'm not going to read those. I hope that you'll be reading your own. This talks about a goal to rebuild the poor roads. The poorest of the poor roads, we have 4 levels of poor, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the poorest of the poor got that way because maintenance wasn't a priority and didn't exist 40 to 60 years ago when those roads were built. And so as Councillor Bryce said, the current report of 36 years is not an acceptable time frame. You have some pictures before you on the desk, and these pictures are of Academy Park Road during the spring thaw. And you can see that you can drive that road and you could fall into a sinkhole without even knowing it's there. Number 2 is about preventive maintenance. The administration is right in saying that preventive maintenance is extremely important. And it was recognized by the administration, and they've put most of the 1% funds toward that. So we're asking that you consider ways to incorporate this into ongoing existing budgets that deal with maintenance. And the second part of maintenance that's up there talks about damage caused by deep frost and water breaks. This year we had a deep frost. Other years we've had a drought, and we have clay soil, and that's in our future. And cuts that have been made to repair those breaks in normal infrastructure rehabilitation of underground pipes puts a real stress on city resources. So we ask that the city ensure that the capacity exists to address those repairs in a timely manner. Some orange barricades have been around for many months. Weather changes and soil issues will continue to plague Regina. So we need to increase the capacity to address it in a timely manner. And another issue that came to my attention from a phone call today is the infill issue. When a street is dug up to accommodate infill and the responsibility of contractors is to bring the road back to its previous condition, that doesn't always happen. So how do we monitor and enforce that type of damage? Number 3 talks about the coordination of underground infrastructure upgrades be given priority for roads that are in really poor conditions. Some of the pipes we've heard have 20 years left in them, but the roadway has failed. D4 poor roads that need repair shouldn't be denied repair because the underground pipes are not at the end of their life.
Councillor Young, you have about 1 minute left on your time.
I have to talk about 4. So 4 calls for a redefinition of the residential road program as outlined in the above amendments to be presented to council as part of the 2019 budget. And that level 3 and 4 roads across the city be given preference in maintenance such as patching and potholes. I think I would just summarize by saying this is about all residential roads, not just about Ward 1 residential roads. We want to ensure the maintenance of roads over their lifetime, and we ask that roads in poor condition be dealt with in a reasonable time frame. I think I would like to make a change to the date up there. The 2019 road budget has already been, all the engineering work has been done for that. And so I would put 2020 for that plan to come back to us.
Okay, that's
in
good.
time for the 2020 budget. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Now, this is the amendment. I think we all understand what that is. Do we have any speakers to the amendment? Councillor Massanelli?
Thank you, Mr.
On
Mayor.
the amendment.
I agree with the amendment pretty much wholeheartedly, except for leaving it open for a reasonable time frame. Stepping into council, I heard about the 1% road residential program. I understood it was going to take effect and have an effect on our roads. Coming up to this report, 64 years at first to have any real effect, and now projected to 36. I think we need to have some definition on what an actual time frame is if we're going to pass this. So maybe propose a friendly amendment of 25 years. Would you be open to that?
Councillor Young?
Did not put a time frame there because I'd really like roadways and waterworks to look across the area and come back to us with what they think is a reasonable time frame with the costing for it. If we give them one, then we set up some parameters, and they may come back with even a better one. The people in the audience said 15 years. That might be the most. I don't know.
Well, I'd like to agree with that, but I think it took the better part of 50 to get to this point, so I can't think things happen overnight. But I think this addresses a capacity issue. It's going to force us to increase our capacity to solve these problems better, and I agree with it, and I'll save my minute until after we go through it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Massanelli. Councillor Stevens on the amendment.
Yes, thank you. I support the amendment. I was wondering if I could get some word from the administration on what the implications are in terms of managing the road renewal budget, investment. Walk us through what this amendment means to administration in terms of capacity. How would we fulfill a new definition, and what kind of expenditure and human resources would that require?
I think that's what the report will ask for, but Ms. Gazemo, can you?
Any estimate before I vote on this?
Through your worship, yeah, it is a difficult question to answer. It will depend on the strategy that's selected and the pace in which would be approved to go forward. What I can tell you, if we increase the number of poor roads, it does substantially increase the amount of capacity that we would need. A typical road rebuild project, so that's typically what would happen to a road in poor condition, takes 4 months to complete, in addition to about 1 year for design ahead of time. So increasing the amount of projects of that size certainly will require additional capacity, not only internally, but also from contractor forces.
Okay, thank you. A follow-up question, because in the amendment as well as the initial report, we're struggling to harmonize waterworks with road. Is this a change in the organization of the road renewal, or is this simply just funding it at a different level.
Ms. Gazemo?
Through you, Your Worship, a change like this will certainly affect the utility or the undergrounds. The funding that comes from the 1% only goes to the roadway portion. On a rebuild project, about every dollar spent on the roads requires an equal dollar to be spent on the undergrounds. So therefore, the budgets that are required from the utility will change. The need will change. And we currently don't have a mechanism within the utility other than to increase utility rates to find that funding. Certainly we can reallocate priorities, which would be an option that could be looked at, but this would be a fairly substantial increase. With the utility as well, where the utility tends to prioritize and where the needs are greatest for the infrastructure are quite often different than the roads. As Councillor Young had mentioned, often a road in poor condition might have infrastructure that's in fairly good condition underneath, and the time for renewal doesn't always line up. We certainly try to maximize the effort and look for opportunities that we can do both. But we always do assess anytime we go in and do a location what can be done to ensure that that underground infrastructure will last the life of the new road that is being built.
Okay, thank you. And one follow-up question, just for clarity's sake, and since we have an audience here, going forward, this means looking at taxation, the mill rate, as well as utility rate increases to fund a program like this, correct? In that broader conversation.
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, to do more poor roads, yes, I think it's correct to say will require more budget than has currently been built through the 1% to date.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure everyone got used to that reality if we go ahead with a more ambitious program.
So, City Manager, you have some comments as well?
Through you, Your Worship, I just wanted to make a comment in terms of recommendation number 4. So, Councillor Young is right. Our planning for 2019 has started in terms of engineering and design, etc. But I think it's important that we're having an initial public meeting around the environmental scan of financial situation that the city faces. We're going to have a preliminary budget conversation on Wednesday. I think it's important that we bring a option for council's consideration as a part of the 2019 budget, but it would not be for implementation until 2020. Because I think it's important, we do have a 5-year capital program. I think it's important that council makes decisions in context of the other competing priorities that you'll see in front of you in the 2019 budget.
Thank you for that. Also, I think there's no mention in the motion of additional taxes beyond the 1%. Or any other change in current budgets simply to fit within that envelope. Okay, Councillor Hawkins, you're next.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. This is an important discussion. I support Councillor Young's amendment. This issue has been before this council for many years now. And I think what the Public Works Committee has said, and I think what's being said tonight to the administration is, you have to take seriously our concern, and the gallery and the size of the gallery also suggests that. As Councillor Young pointed out, this is not just a problem for Ward 1, it's a problem for Ward 2 and for other wards in the city. This is not very pleasant. It's not very pleasant because it's been a problem that's been handed to us by past generational failure to keep up. That doesn't alleviate us from the responsibility of challenging it. I want to underline in Councillor Young's motion, in number 1, the words reasonable goal. When options are being developed to help us, I think reasonable goal is front and center, and that's not 36 years and it's not 64 years. It's a reasonable goal, and I'd ask administration to take it seriously. Significantly reduced, same comment, take it seriously. We need some help here, and we need some creative thinking on the part of the administration. I don't want to hear very much that Waterworks is doing one thing and Roadways is doing another thing, and they're sort of not coordinating. I'd like to see a plan that develops that coordination and, what's more, finds through innovation ways to save money. So there's a challenge here for council to say we have to find a way to correct generational past failures in local road maintenance. But there's a challenge here for the administration, a difficult one, which says you have to think differently about this problem, because the kind of options that the Public Works Committee got are just not acceptable. So I'm in support of this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Flagel.
Thanks. And I'm in support of this too. I just want some clarification though. On number 5, it talks about potholes and patches. We used to look into these. There were some industry standards where people had automated pothole fixers, and they'd drive out. It'd be one person, and they'd heat a spot, throw asphalt in, do it, and instead of having 2 or 3 workers. That used to be something, and that was done out, I remember, by Sweetbright. And I forget the name of the pothole fixer, but it was is an individual. And so cost effectiveness might be something if there's any other things, because we seem to be going to just the standard fixing of potholes. The other thing is, in this, and I think there's room to, in the number 5 of patching and potholes, is I'm driving down one of my streets, and I see an area that's got 3 potholes. So I phone in, service request, like I'm supposed to, tell them where they are. I happen to miss the one that's 10 feet away. They won't fix that one that's 10 feet away. What I'm looking at is efficiency within our own department to speed things up so that we can spend more time or less time driving back and forth in the Northwest or wherever it happens to be. And I brought this up before. The other thing, and if I go to, I'll just keep this one on the same. I was just in Winnipeg this weekend, and I've sent pictures to our administration, to one of our directors, regarding strip asphalting. So instead of ripping up the whole road, there you can do a section wide, however wide the pavers are, rip right up the middle of the street, lay asphalt 2 to 3 inches deep. The sides where the cars park, generally, not always, are in reasonable shape. Maybe the undergrounds, and this could be another efficiency used in that level 3 and 4 situation, so we're not ripping up everything that needs to be done, but the main part where everybody is driving can be utilized. The other part of this is when we go to fixing number 3 roads, how often are we replacing or repairing undergrounds on a particular 3 or 4? Ever? 0? Once? 90% of the time?
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, I'm going to start, and then perhaps I'll ask Mr. Doney to add a bit. When we are doing any work on pretty much anything in the residential road program, but primarily those more in the fair and the poor condition, we share or we coordinate the program with Waterworks. They do an assessment of the infrastructure and look at the current condition and identify repairs that need to be done. Particularly when we go into a road that's poor and we're doing a rebuild, there is more significant work being done on the undergrounds. So the level 3 and 4 that's up there are in that poor category, but all of the roads in poor would get some level of underground infrastructure repair. Mr. Doney, see if there's anything additional he could provide that would give us a sense of how much work.
Mr. Doney?
Through you, Your Worship. So for all the poor roads that are done, we will typically replace the water main if it's a concrete pipe, and we'll also reline the wastewater and storm lines if they need to be done to reduce the risk of any breaks happening in future. So that's on those poor roads that get rebuilt.
Okay, good. Okay, thanks. Those are just some of the things that I noticed within this amendment, so appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Bryce on the amendment.
On the amendment, thank you. So I just want to clarify from the response from the city mayor or city manager. Did you want that changed to 2019? The budget discussion in 2019 through you, Mr. Mayor?
Oh, so city manager, I don't think he wants that, no.
Through your worship, I would prefer that it says we'll bring something as a part of the 2019 budget, but that we will not be able to implement until 2020. It's important that council makes the deliberation and decision on what the future road program will look like in context of other priorities that you'll have to discuss as a part of the 2019 budget.
Thank you. That's what I thought that you said.
But that, just on a point of order on that one, to city manager, we're not making a decision in 2019. We'll be doing it in 2020. So if you leave it at 2020 when you change it, we've already done the program for 2019. Is that not right, Mr. City Manager? Makes it confusing.
Through your worship, the 1% that the current program continues for one more year. So the proposed budget from the administration will include 1% for 2019. If we're going to make adjustments or modifications to the program in terms of a distribution of investment to residential, whether it be the poor, fair, or good, that decision should be made as a part of 2019. We won't be able to plan for it in terms of an implementation until 2020. So we would bring a proposal as to how we'd like to move forward in 2019. If there's any choices around increased investment, that would take effect in 2020 because that'd be the earliest we can implement the program.
Thank you. So having said that, is there enough time to come up with a redefinition of the residential road renewal program as outlined by the 2019 budget talks? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. City Manager.
Through your worship, I'm going to defer that to Ms. Gazmo. Her and her team will be the ones doing the work. But that would be the preference.
Ms. Gazmo.
Through your worship, yes, I support what the city manager is saying. It would, because we often need to do the design work and the selection work a year ahead of time, it's better to make the decision early, such that we know what the 2020 budget will be, so that we can start designing the program and the selection sooner than later. So a conversation in 2019 would, for the 2019 budget process, would make more sense.
Okay, so I'll maybe ask that again. So do we have enough time from this point now to when we're doing the 2019 budget process to redefine the residential road renewal program as outlined in the amendments?
Mr. City Manager.
Through your worship, yes, we do. And as I've indicated, as Ms. Gazmo's indicated, it's important that we do that. If we don't do that, then we won't be making changes until 2021. Because we'll be bringing changes as a part of the 2020 budget, and we'll have already, again, done design engineering work. So it's important that we bring it, and we will be prepared to do that.
Thank you. I'm not prepared to wait till 2021, so I'm going to ask maybe the mover of the amendment if we can change that back to 2019 through you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Young.
Okay.
Put it back to a friendly amendment to 2019.
Thank you. So this gives us an opportunity with this amendment to take another look at what we're doing, how we're doing it, why we're doing it, and look at the goal that we actually had in place with the original motion way back when we talked about the residential road renewal, fixing these poor roads. I'm not okay with somebody having to move out of their home or not be able to get out of their home if they have accessibility issues. I'm not okay with that. If I needed a walker or wheelchair and I can't even walk down my street that I want to live in because my family and friends are around me, I'm not okay with having to move. So I think we need to address this issue for the health of the residents in the areas, as well as maintaining the neighborhood and the housing prices and the like. I just think that we need to do something about these roads that have been neglected. Ward 1 has the dubious distinction of number 1. Ward 7 has the dubious distinction of number 2. So I'm right with you there. And it doesn't matter, I've talked to all of the councillors, whatever ward they're in. The roads are a big concern for all of us. We all want something done about these poor roads. So I think this is a way to do it, and it's a way to relook what we had originally planned and see how we need to change it to meet our goals. So I'll leave that with the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Now go to Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. There's a question that was posed by the first delegation as to I wonder why we got here. I've heard a couple comments from the floor of council about that. I want to speak a little bit about history, about some things that are done, and I'm going to challenge the audience as well. The first one is probably around 1990, not just in Regina, but in Canada, there get to be a famous phrase. It was called deferred maintenance. You see, what happened was a lot of the roads that were built in the 60s and 70s were still not bad in 1990 or 93. And so as a way of keeping taxes down, councils of the day said, let's defer that maintenance, we can do it later. No one complained because their taxes were down. About 2008, 2010, started to be a national discussion. And so in Regina, we hosted 2 national infrastructure summits. The idea was, one, to inform the public of, first of all, what infrastructure was, but also to engage both federal and provincial governments that they have a role to play in solving the issue. As currently in Saskatchewan, no different than any other province, we have about 82% of the population living in urban settings, and we provide services for the rest of the province. So what we tried to do during those infrastructure summits was invite senior orders of government to have a look at infrastructure and infrastructure funding. By that I mean, if we only look at the property tax base as a means to look after these things, you and I can't afford it. Now, you may have followed recently in the federal government, this federal government, the other one was doing a similar one. I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but they have announced infrastructure funding. It's a big deal, and it's in the billions of dollars. But true to form, it's typically for new shiny objects. So you have a role to play. All of these people who, by the way, understand the problem, all of these people who clearly understand the problem, but now you have a role to play as well. In the next little while, some people are going to come knocking on your door, and they'll want your support. I suggest you ask them what's their view of helping municipalities solve old infrastructure problems with a share of their tax revenue that you are already paying, by the way, and where people are living, and that therefore that's how we also together can solve the problem. You're not hearing anything surprising on here because this is not shocking. This is not shocking. And if you leave it just to this level here, just to do it, I'm sorry, there's going to be a discussion about dollars and cents. It's going to boil down to that. So you have a role to play here as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Fundera.
Thank you, Worship, through you. I think we started going in the right direction when we decided to take the Local Improvement Act thing and throw it out and bring in 1%. Because what happens is I have a big problem right now. There's one street in my area was built on the local improvement, and the other one's being built now, and guess what? The people that did the local improvement are not very happy because they're paying double. So that kind of idea from previous years might have worked then. But you know what? We learned from that. I don't think it's working or has worked because here we are. Councilor O'Donnell mentioned about history. So this 1% that we dedicated solely to the roads, and deferral was the main discussion about take it from this bucket and put it into this bucket. That's why we didn't do anything. And that's where we find ourselves into where we are right now. So when we're looking at including sufficient budgets for reconstruction, when there are road cuts, and Councillor Young mentioned about roads are being cut because we're doing extra work or infill or whatever, we just fix the pipe or fix the road, fixing the pipe, and we don't go to that area to fix it, and then just becomes a problem. So my question to administration is that how do we deal with number 2 to come up with the number 1 where it says sufficient, a reasonable goal? So how would number 2 play into that reasonable goal to say we can make it 15? So if 10 to 15 years is a reasonable goal to say we can really tackle with the funds we have to have a reasonable way of showing that we're actually doing something, how is number 2 going to play with the reasonable goal?
I think they're going to come back with that report, Councillor Flago, but Ms. Gizmo, want to try that one?
Through your worship, I think I would have to leave it at that. Through the report, I think we can answer that question better.
Okay. So then the question is, for me, with taking away from one funding to add to another funding, how is that going to help, like the audience wants, the residents want, to bring us back into that quality of life that people are asking for? Because when you're talking about roads, and when the motion is about quality of life. So how do we find ourselves financially when taxpayers are asking for all the roads being done? I heard a delegation talking about some being envious of other roads being done and this is not being done. How are we going to find ourselves that we can answer that? When it's going to come back to us, what's going to be the answer?
Mr. City Manager?
So through your worship, as Ms. Gizmo's indicated, the detail will be in the report. I think it's really important. We are in the situation we're in today with our residential roads because we have not made the level of investment that we needed to make. And we can get creative and we can get innovative as an administration, but there is no silver bullet. We will bring a proposal back that says if we want a reasonable goal in terms of a time frame, and we want to make sure that we continue to invest preventive maintenance on our fair and good roads, we will be back in front of you with some options to maximize the current level of investment that we have, but also to look at what additional funding would be required for us to be able to put a program in place that you as a council, us as an administration, and residents can get behind. So that work is yet to come, but it will be challenging in terms of the options that we bring back.
Thank you. And to your worship, just to comment to Councillor Flego, just said a text, you're saying cutting the middle of the road and paving doesn't work. So Winnipeg, take it back.
Thank you for that, little gem. Any other speakers? Councillor Stevens, if you could take the chair, please. Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. I want to start by thanking Councillor Young for the motion and Councillor Bryce as well for this, the work being done, members of the Works and Infrastructure Committee as well for their commentary and discussions they've had prior to this coming to Council. This is a big problem. So I want to thank the members of Council for that. I also want to thank the people in the gallery for being here. This is an important issue, and I'm glad to see people come out that want to talk about this and find some solutions. I thank the delegations as well. But I also want to thank the administration because we tasked them about 4 years ago to dedicate 1% on your mill rate to look at local roads, poor roads. And from that discussion came a report back that said, let's do that, but let's also have another component which is important, which is preventative maintenance on those roads that will also at some point come into disrepair as poor streets are. So we began to see this balance that came out. And clearly we have a lot of kilometers of roads or streets that need to be fixed, not just in Ward 1, Ward 7, all over the city. Certainly in Councillor O'Donnell's area, Councillor Pindero's, Councillor Hawkins' area are all areas where we have issues on poor roads. But we're doing a lot of great work from the decisions that we made at budget time for the last several years on preventive maintenance as well as poor roads. So not as though we've done nothing, but clearly the pace has not been enough, and the pictures that we see are just examples of what that is. So I support the change that Councillor Young is putting forward. I support having the administration come back with what they think is the right number of years on a model. I support that as well. I support the work being done within the current budget envelope. So we're not expanding to 2% or more, at least not at this moment anyway, as a point of discussion. It's going to be difficult because it's about balance and about choices. So when Councillor O'Donnell spoke of infrastructure nationally and how things are done provincially, these are very telling comments, and I want to add a bit to that, but I want to have a question to the administration first. I know the answer, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Are local roads that we have that are the subject matter of tonight's discussion, are they eligible for funding under federal provincial infrastructure funding?
City Manager?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No. We do use some gas tax funding to help with road infrastructure renewal, but it's limited pretty much to that.
There is no funding for an incredibly important quality of life issue here. So when we talk about the City of Regina or any municipality in Canada trying to find money to do this, just keep this in mind. Of all the money collected by every government of Canada, provincial, municipal, and federal, 8 cents of every dollar goes to your municipality. 8 cents of every dollar. So if you think about what you want to get repaired and fixed, everything that we do in the city affects people every day. Garbage collection, snow removal, fixing roads, police, fire, come out of that 8 cents of every dollar you send to all your governments. This is no excuse, it simply is the reality. We are trying to find a balance that will answer the question of the delegation that Councillor Young and Councillor Bryce have brought forward. I know the members of council as well. We're trying to find the balance. So I think we've done a good job with the 1%. That was a great milestone to dedicate to do this. But now we have to look at it again and say, well, maybe we can do better. And I think we will do better. The administration has heard our comments, heard comments from the delegation, from members of council about how we want to see a recalibration of this money to ensure that we get the work done. It is difficult to go down some of the streets, not just in Ward 1, but in Ward 2, in Councillor Hawkins' area as well. Councillor Bryce, I've been around the city as well, and Councillor O'Donnell's their area as well. But we are getting there. Are we going fast enough? Clearly we're not. Let's step up a little bit and see what the administration has to say on this one. I look forward to seeing the report. But keep this in mind. You have the attention of council. We will work on this as best we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Councillor Young, if you want to close debate on the amendment, you can. Otherwise, we'll vote on the amendment. Oh. Gotta get your hand up there faster, Councillor Bashani.
Got my button. Thank you, Your Worship. I too support the amendment, and I thank you for the work that's being done. When it came to Public Works, I was very surprised in the 35 years, and that's how long it takes to get roads done. Some of us won't be around to see the roads get done. So one of the big things I think that when we're looking at this report, I would ask administration, I know Saskatoon has done a lot of work in this. So in different ways, trying to find efficiencies, I would ask that we look out to other jurisdictions when we're doing this. I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel. It'll save some time, but I think that would be very helpful in that way. So I'll leave that there. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Bashani. Do you want to close debate on the amendment? Okay, you have 3 minutes, Councillor Young.
Thank you. Am I turned on? Yes. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think you've heard many sides of the issue this evening, both from the people who have come to speak to us and from members of council. So I think it's well understood. And I have one hope for this. And the hope is that we don't simply get back a supplemental report with a few more numbers in it and more taxes. We may have to have a greater investment. I give you that. But I hope that we look at the work that we do now with the funds that we have now and how we can improve what we already fund as well as a greater investment, which means talking across departments and areas and having the kinds of discussions that bring about some innovation and some creativity. So I wish to thank everybody tonight for their comments. I think they were all right on. And I look forward to the report that's going to come forward.
Thank you, Councillor Young. You've closed debate on the amendment. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. We do have the main motion as amended. We've had 2 speakers so far, Councillor Bryce, Councillor Young. Any further discussion? We sort of, I think, had our say, I think. So I'll ask the question on the report as amended. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried unanimously. We now thank you very much, everyone in the gallery, for listening and your presentations. We'll now go on to City Manager's report. We have 2 reports. Councillor Stevens. Just wait till the gallery clears out, then we can continue on.
I introduced the City Manager's reports. Right, okay. I know. There's lots to talk about. So. You guys are missing the best part of the show. Come on, there's still lots here. We got appointments.
Almost ready to go.
Good to go?
Ready to go.
Thank
Councillor
you.
Stevens.
Through your worship. So we have two reports here, CM 18-11, City Manager's reports. The first, that Justice Lena Krogan and Mr. Dale Eisler and Mr. Jim Nickel be appointed to the Municipal Wards Commission with the terms of office to expire upon completion of a ward boundary review and filing of the required report with City Council. That Justice Lena Krogan serve as the chair of the Municipal Wards Commission.
Could I have a seconder for that, please? Councillor O'Donnell? First, I'm going to ask the administration for some background information if they want to add to the discussion at all. Mr. Clerk, you're up.
Thank you, Your Worship, to members of Council and those in the gallery. The Municipal Wards Commission is something that is required under the Cities Act for municipalities to review the existing ward composition based on the changing population. And as noted in the report, when the last boundary review was completed in 2014, the population numbers from Saskatchewan Health indicated that Regina had a population of just under 215,000, and the new census data from 2018 indicates that our population is currently at about 232,000. What this means is, both from the numbers and anecdotally, as we know around the city, the population has shifted. And one of the requirements under legislation is that ward boundaries, the population in each ward cannot vary by more than plus or minus 10%. So the Ward Commission is something that is statutorily set up to be comprised of a representative from the Court of Queen's Bench, from the University of Regina, as well as the City Clerk of Regina. What we will do is we will work with various agencies within the City of Regina, particularly the Geomatics Division, and they will take the population. There will be a number of mapping options thrown out. We will invite participation and input from members of the public as to their historical patterns of voting, et cetera, members of City Council and all other interested parties will also be offered an opportunity to provide their input, at which time the Commission will set out a number of recommendations with respect to the boundaries. Again, keeping in mind that the paramount consideration is that each boundary has to remain within plus or minus 10% of the average size. So in this case, using those census numbers, it will be plus or minus 10% of 23,200. And after those initial recommendations are published for a public hearing, the committee or the Commission will then retire and make its final decisions.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. We do have some discussion on this one. Councillor Bryce?
Thank you. I understand the 10%, and I've been through it before. I get concerned when I see communities split up, or divided. So what do we have in place to prevent that from happening?
Mr. Clerk?
There's nothing per se stopping it from happening. What is required, Councillor, is that groups, interested parties, yourself, for example, community associations, can come to the Commission and make that pitch. What happens is over time is that historical voting patterns or historical locations will inevitably change. I recall in the last discussion there were a couple of representations that were made to say, well, we've always have voted on this side of the creek, for example. Well, there do come times when the population patterns change so much that isn't accommodated anymore, or can be accommodated. So that's one consideration. But again, I think last time only 2 ward boundaries changed because there was very minimal change. I think it's fair to say that we expect that there will be significant change this year. The larger the change means that there may be more opportunities to have the boundaries contained around historical community associations, for example. So that's the best I can offer at this time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Councillor Flagel.
Thank you, and if you don't mind, I'm going to sit. My leg is sore. Thank you. May I?
Go right ahead.
Yeah, I'd rather, because it's killing me if I stand up.
Want a cane?
No, I'm good for now. I'm on this same topic like Councillor Bryce was just talking about. I applied and I went to this commission, and what I want to say is that I went to the Minister's Office of Community and Government Relations, Jim Reeder at the time, and his office said if the split creates a problem within the communities and the community associations in their charter or whatever it is, the commission can make an exception on the plus or minus of 10%. But that didn't happen. And I'll speak of Walsh Acres. Councillor Bryce and I share Walsh Acres. Walsh Acres creates a newsletter for Walsh Acres Lake Ridge Garden Ridge that goes out to 12,000 people. 2,000 of those people in Walsh Acres have to go to Councillor Bryce's community association. This isn't about voting. This isn't about polling stations. This is nothing to do with that. It was strictly a community-based organization, puts out a newsletter to 12,000 people, and 2,000 people in that area don't get it, or they'll get it, but they don't get the same benefits that they would having me as a councillor or everyone else is, everybody in Walsh Acres being a councillor, but they'd have to take over the whole Lake Ridge Garden Ridge in order to do that. My numbers we were not that far out. I think if I remember correctly, it was in the neighborhood of about 14% as opposed to 10. But is the 10 a provincial or a Canadian law?
Mr. Clark.
I will ask the city solicitor to add in anything from his perspective. My understanding is that the 10% is set by provincial statute, and the 10% is non-debatable. We asked this question. I may be wrong, and I stand to be corrected, Councillor. Mm-hmm. But again, my recollection is very clear in dealing with the municipal, the government ministry of, or government relations ministry. The 10% is the absolute threshold. You have to make that plus or minus 10%. All other considerations may be taken into account, but they cannot jeopardize the plus or minus 10%.
Mr. Woory, do you have any comment on that?
Yes, Your Worship. City Clerk is correct. The 10% requirement is contained in the Cities Act, and it is the trigger for initiating a review of the ward boundaries when there's a 10% differential. The criteria that are considered as part of the process do take into account a number of statutory criteria, including community of interest of the inhabitants, reference to polling areas from the previous election, and current and prospective population trends. So, and the city clerk will have been familiar with this process, having been involved in the previous ward review, so certainly defer to him in terms of how these statutory criteria do play out in the course of doing the review.
Okay. Well, then I will go back to the minister's office and find what they had told me, and this came right from him and his aide. Forget the young man's name, but they had said nothing about the 10%. So I just questioned that. I'm going to go check it out. I'll go talk with Minister Harpower, I think she's finance.
It's actually Minister Warren Keating.
Keating? Okay, Keating. Right, yes. So I will go to his office and find out. But, this whole thing, and I know the boundaries change. I know Councillor Murray and Councillor Stevens, like, theirs is a dog's breakfast. I mean, in terms of exactly geographic, and cutting through one side street, and then it's Ward 2s or one Ward 1s, and et cetera, et cetera. So I know in Winnipeg, one of the councillors that I've met over the years, he had 35 or 37,000 in his ward, and one of his co-workers had 26,000. So they obviously don't follow the same guidelines, and you know what? They all get paid the same amount of money. And he said, yeah, it might be a couple extra phone calls, but it's no big deal. So maybe we need to even look at provincial and how we can fit this. Because if we can go through geographics like we used to, like going down Sherwood Drive, well now, that's been split away again. And there's some simple boundaries that could be looked at as opposed to 11%, 12%, 9%, strict, easy boundaries, keeping communities together. And, and looking at that. Maybe one day, eventually, you're going to split up Argyle Park and Inglewood, and they're both right within the same. I mean, because they're community different, but their geographical boundaries are simple. So I think we need to maybe take a look at the geographics of all the boundaries we have, and not just the 10%. And we can debate the Cities Act on that one and make some changes if we can. Thanks.
Councillor Flagel, it might be a good idea to see what actually comes out of the report and see how they actually deal with those issues too. They may actually answer those questions as well. Other discussion on the report? Call the question. Of those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Councillor Stevens on the Integrity Commissioner.
Thank you, through the chair. Item CM 18-12, the appointment of Mr. Randy Langard to the position of Integrity Commissioner. Can I, I'm seeking a motion to receive and file, please?
Yes, I'll do that. Councillor Marchand, you want to second it? Okay.
I'd ask administration perhaps to
Administration,
comment.
please. Mr. City Manager.
Through you, Your Worship, the report in front of you is the appointment of Integrity Commissioner for the City of Regina. This came from a change of the Cities Act in 2016, which required councils to adopt a code of ethics. This council adopted bylaw 2017-4, the Code of Ethics bylaw in 2017. That incorporated a code of ethics for council members, and it provided a process for investigating and adjudicating complaints, which use the services of an integrity commissioner. Between the city clerk and the city solicitor, they've gone through a process where the position was advertised. They went through a selection process, and Mr. Randy Langard has been appointed to that position for the next 3 years. And if there's any detail that you'd like further to the specifics of the hiring, then Mr. Weary can provide further background.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager. Any discussion on the report? All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. We'll move to Executive Committee report. We have this on the White Butte Regional Planning Committee Memorandum of Agreement. Mr. Elliott, Jim Elliott has a communication. If I could ask for a motion to receive and file that, please. Councillor Hawkins moves as seconder. Okay, Councillor Massanelli. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Councillor Stevens on the report 18-77, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, White Butte Regional Planning Committee Memorandum of Agreement. Two recommendations coming from the Executive Committee that the Memorandum of Agreement in terms of reference for the Regional Planning Committee be amended as outlined in Appendix A. And second, that the City Clerk be authorized to execute the amendment of the Memorandum of Agreement. Seek concurrence.
Thank you for that. I'm going to ask the administration if they have any background comments on this. Ms. Howard, do you want to provide some comments on it?
Through you, Your Worship, we've been a member of the White Butte Regional Planning Committee for a number of years. Earlier this year, 3 members did leave the committee, 3 other municipalities. And so it was at that time that the existing committee members thought it would be a good idea to make some amendments to the current memorandum of agreement. So we already do have a memorandum of agreement that's in place, and to change some things that are outlined in the report, specifically the one was with respect to how members leave the organization, et cetera, because those weren't in the old agreements. So the report outlines all the amendments that are there. Administration does support these changes. The other municipalities are all taking these agreements forward to their respective councils for approval. So the idea is to have the same agreement for all municipalities. I can answer any specific questions, or Mr. Richard, that you might have with the terms of the agreement.
Thank you for that. And any comments or discussion on the report? Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I wonder if the administration could explain to us why 3 members left the original committee.
Ms. Howard.
Through Your Worship, at this time it was a decision of their councils that they believed that the intent of the committee that was achieved, the things that they were looking at that point in time. The groups and those municipalities have indicated that they still want to work with all the municipalities, just not under this committee structure.
I find that answer difficult to understand. I hear that they left because they felt their voices weren't being heard. Am I misinformed?
Through you, Your Worship, I can't answer specifically. I can just say that in the letters that were sent to the committee members, to which we are party, there are members of the commission that are here. Councillor Bresciani sits as a full member, and I believe Councillor Mancinelli and the mayor sits and has sat on the committee since its inception. Well, since we joined. Yes.
I haven't got an answer to this question. I'm going to ask it again through the mayor. Can someone explain to me why the 3 members left the committee?
I don't know what else can be added to that, Councillor Hawkins. You've already heard from what the administration said in terms of letters sent officially to the Whiteview Planning Committee. There's lots of other discussions that have been had, but those are the official reasons why.
So the representatives of this council are saying that the administration may know the answer. The administration is saying that the councillors may know the answer. The reality is I'm not getting an answer, and I think there is an answer here. And it would be very helpful to know what the answer is. Were they happy? Why did they leave? It's a straightforward question.
Ms. Harlock, do you have anything else to answer, to add to that?
At this time, as I indicated, there was a number of projects at the beginning of when the committee was set up. One specifically being the 2 overpasses, one at Balgoni and one at White City, and it was felt that they had achieved their goals in getting that through.
I think that Councillor Bresciani may have some additional comments you may want to make. Councillor Bresciani.
Yes, I do sit on the White Butte. There was discussions after they left. One of the questions, it did come up, there was discussions around the agenda. There was some of the municipalities they were working on their OCP. After that, they had some other things that they wanted to work on within their own municipality. And one of the things that I know this committee was working on was the Trans-Canada Trail. And some of those municipalities right now did not want to move forward on that agenda or that item. And so they just felt that they needed a little time to kind of do a strategic plan within their municipality, each one, and then we'd have the discussion. I know myself, Mayor Fougere, and Chris Holden, as well as Diana Howrelick, will be sitting down with those other municipalities and moving forward, because I think that they as well know for economic development that there is, of course, a benefit there for us all to be together, and that's why it was formed. So in short and sweet, the answer is some of the agenda items that they really felt they need to get their strategic plan together and then come back to the bigger group. So I'll leave it there.
That's a very helpful answer. Thank you. I have one other question. So what's happening here is you've got 7 entities. The City of Regina is one. We're being asked here to go into a memorandum of agreement with 3 of the entities. Are we also planning or talking or thinking about, as a City of Regina, of forming some kind of regional group with the 3 entities that appear to be on the outside?
Ms. Harlock?
Through you, Your Worship, as Councillor Bresciani said, there is plans in the works. When this item was brought forward to Council to let Council know that the 3 other members were leaving, Council instructed administration to go for, or it was within the report that we go out and we talk to those municipalities. At this time, there's no thought from an administration to form a separate committee. I think from a regional perspective, we want to keep our lines of communication open, and when there's opportunities to work together, that those lines are open and that we can see if there's mutual benefiting opportunities for all the municipalities or individual municipalities. Just like we have with the RM of Sherwood as an example, we have special agreements with the RM of Sherwood with how we handle planning applications. So maybe in the future we might be able to do something similar with the other municipalities.
Thank you, Your Worship. I have a few comments and I'll make them briefly. The first is that I'm in favor of regionalization. It's a good idea. The second is that it's clearly in this case regionalization failed, and I'm concerned that the memorandum of agreement that we put in place will make it more difficult for these other communities to come back into the fold. I'm concerned that it's unrealistic in terms of the requirement that communities have to go through to leave the fold, and I'm concerned about the very cumbersome dispute resolution process that's in place. In the end, this kind of thing is a voluntary thing, and I think it's very important that we work together as a group, and I don't want to see these other three communities excluded. I'm going to vote against this memorandum of agreement because I think it's premature. I think the discussions have to go on between all 7 entities, and when all 7 are ready, I think that some kind of association has to be entered into. But this is not the kind of association I'm looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Other discussion on this report? Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We'll now move on to Regina Planning Commission. Councillor O'Donnell, with respect to a semi-detached and multifamily housing one in Harbour Landing. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can I have a second? I'll speak to this.
Second for it. Councillor Massanelli.
Thanks very much. The address is 5602 Waterway Road. There was a previous plan for approval of a special needs daycare situation here. So the expectation in this area, right adjacent to an existing built now, seniors care home, etc. But of course, one fell through. So this land, part of the land, is being replaced with a care home, and we thought this was logical and seek concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Discussion on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next one is a parkade expansion. Report 79. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you again. If I could have a seconder, please.
Seconder, please. Councillor Massanelli again.
Thanks. The address is 1900 Albert Street, and in fact, it is an expansion of a parkade. The parkade is over on Angus Street. Part of the trade-off on this, in order to expand that parkade, was to ask for a greening, a softening of Albert Street. So there will be a park, and if you know the building, it's actually just over across from us right here. It would have a lot of trees and a greened area. It's currently a concrete kind of park, I'll call it. And so we saw that this is a benefit. It would take more cars, hopefully, off the road, out of the parking in that area, and put them into a parkade. I can't remember ever having a parkade expansion in the last 12 years of council. So I'm calling this an exciting moment here on the floor.
It's all about parking. Other discussion on this? I have a question of the administration, just to speak to the issue of the downtown neighborhood plan with respect to public art infrastructure that's being recommended here next to the parkade. This is good news. It's not just a more parking in a parkade, which is good, but the facade around the building will contain art ultimately. But some of the other comments and some of the things we expect to see on the street as a result of this development. Ms. Harlock?
Thank you, Your Worship. I might ask Mr. Searle to go through all the details, as he's been working very closely with the proponents on this.
Mr. Searle, you have to answer one question tonight.
Policies that and tools that the administration could work with in working with developers to help leverage additional benefits for our downtown, including improvements to public realm. And in this particular case, this relates to the public art installations, as well as the upgrade of streetscaping along Albert Street and the softening of that streetscape. And certainly that was one of the objectives of the plan, was to create better conditions in our downtown for pedestrians and a more attractive environment. So certainly the plan has given us those tools to leverage these things as we're considering development proposals.
Thank you for that. Other questions or comments on this? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Report 80. This is on a recycling property. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks again. The address is 205 First Avenue East. If I could have a second, I'll speak.
Councillor Fundura.
Thanks very much. So there's an existing salvage yard here. Actually, I want to ask the administration if I could first. This is a recycling for metals. And how does that work with the city? In other words, do we encourage people to use it and so on? If I could have a comment on that, please.
Ms. Howlack?
Through your worship, do we encourage recycling? Yes.
Yes, thank you.
You asked the question.
Thanks for that. Specific to this yard and how it works, it's a private enterprise. So.
I would have to defer that to Mr. Searle.
Mr. Searle.
Your worship, our zoning bylaw, in particular the IB zone, creates the opportunities for these types of businesses to collect metals, to do it in a safe manner, and to facilitate the recycling process. So the applicant has proposed a site plan that looks at how that works in terms of the intake of the metals and then what happens to them afterwards in terms of their recycling. So this really helps them to better facilitate that process.
Thank you for the answer. I'll now explain why I asked the question. So part of the plan here is that it's an expansion of an existing yard. There will be an office development here that's an existing building, so they can do what they have to do in an office. But it also facilitates a clean drop-off area so that if there are people in the public who need to come into the yard, it is safe, secure, and it can be handled. There's also rail right along this. They've been adjacent there for a long time. An existing business who is looking at expanding saw this as a real benefit to our community. Seek concurrence, please.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. Discussion. Councillor Fundera.
Just want to rise to support this, Your Worship. I've noticed that area has really cleaned up, and that's what this next project is going to be. When you go into their yard, and the safety was number one, environmental safety as well with the trains and all the recycling stuff. So this is a good thing. So I'm all for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fundera. Councillor Bryce.
Thank you. It was mentioned about the rail yard adjacent. It looks like the railroad runs right through this. Is that true? And is there any mitigation that needs to happen for this to move forward? Through you, Mr. Mayor?
Ms. Howlack.
I'm looking at Appendix A-1.
Through your worship, I just asked Mr. Searle to confirm whether or not there's a spur line that goes in to collect materials.
Mr. Searle?
Your worship, there is a spur at that location, and in this particular case, there would be no mitigation that would be required with respect to that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bryce. Further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Information item from Executive Committee, the 2018 semi-annual closed Executive Committee items. Councillor Stevens?
IR 18-10, semi-annual review. Can I get a motion to receive and file, please?
Councillor Hawkins?
Would a member of administration like to introduce this item?
Mr. Clerk, how about a couple of comments from you on this one?
Thank you, Your Worship. As part of the procedure bylaw, administration prepares a report to Executive Committee twice a year for a 6-month period, just outlining any items that had been considered in a private session, which were subsequently moved to a public meeting of City Council as required by legislation. So this is just an annual standard report telling you which reports have now been closed.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Discussion on the report. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Move to motion MN 18-8 from Councillor Stevens on supporting a national cycling strategy.
Thank you. So this motion has one simple objective, and that's to add the City of Regina's voice to a call for a national cycling strategy by supporting a private member's bill advanced by federal MP Gord Johns. As the resolution calls, the City Council write to Gord Johns, Member of Parliament, Honourable Mark Garneau, Minister of Transportation, Honourable Catherine McKenna, Minister of Environment, and the Honourable Ralph Goodale, Minister of Public Safety, to encourage the passage and implementation of Bill C-312, the National Cycling Strategy Act. I think most importantly here, it costs us nothing and it allows us to bridge our transportation master plan objectives and commitments with federal level that kind of works to focus the spending of federal infrastructure dollars. There's billions on the table. Again, this kind of bridges both the strategy and planning for how that money is spent, and further links municipalities with the federal government, I think, in a very smart and important way. As the mover of this motion points out, this would hopefully allow Canada to get on the same track as countries like Germany and Sweden, where there is more national and municipal attention in terms of the value that cycling pays to the growth of cities, the environmental sustainability component of new modes of transportation. I think also as we work to become more of a modern city, cycling infrastructure, biking, and safety is a critical part of it. I won't read the bill in its entirety. 3112 makes a couple of important points, which I argue align with many of the commitments Council has already made. First, this says to commit the federal government to set clear targets for the expansion of cycling-friendly infrastructure, to encourage more Canadians to choose cycling as their mode of transportation, improve national safety standard measures such as side guard rails for trucks, support cycle tourism in Canada, and I think most importantly, increase education for cyclists, pedestrians, and motorists. And I think this last point is particularly important considering recent developments in our city, and it's actually quite tragic and not uncommon. The life-threatening injuries sustained by a resident after a near-fatal collision with an SUV. And if we look at the national tally, we're seeing thousands of injuries and sadly dozens of fatalities as a result of poor infrastructure, education, and communication, I would argue. More recently in the news, we've seen a case of a woman's guide dog having its foot run over and actually being decommissioned as a safety animal simply because it's not able to do its duty. Part of that was a result of people not understanding that they're not supposed to be riding their bikes on the sidewalk, but at the same time that there is not sufficient cycling infrastructure to be a safe cyclist in many parts of Regina. And I guess just to conclude here, I'm asking Council's support, which would add our voice to the village of Cumberland, the cities of Victoria, Toronto, Port Alberni, and the mayor of Ottawa, in addition to cycling advocacy groups from across Canada to endorse this private members bill. And I guess maybe just to conclude here, often there's this concern about jurisdiction, who controls what. This isn't forfeiting any responsibility. In fact, it's endorsing a federal recognition of priorities we've placed in the Transportation Master Plan, and hopefully providing financial assistance and other forms of guidance from the federal government in terms of how do we design and implement cycling infrastructure and connect this with federal dollars. So I seek your support.
I need a seconder for your motion. Councillor Young. Discussion on the report. Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just have one question for Councillor Stevens. Does this bill propose that a requirement for mandatory bicycle helmet wearing be included in the interest of safety?
To my knowledge, that's not an explicit component. However, education about safety, we could interpret as meaning looking at the investment in those type of rules, regulations, but it's not as prescriptive as talking about helmets, rather the broader work of safety in the cycling world.
Thank you very much. I just have one comment to make here. The question of cycling infrastructure, cycling lanes comes before council periodically, and it's something in principle I support. I think it's necessary for safety, but I only support it on the condition that the city adopt a mandatory bicycle helmet bylaw. The simple reality is you get one brain, you fall off a bike, and you get injured in your brain, and the results are catastrophic for you and the people you love and who love you. So I think that just a critical part of bicycle safety is a requirement that people wear bicycle helmets. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. Councillor Young.
Thank you, Your Worship. I support this, but I would like to see the bill, and I would like to have administration see the bill. So I'd like that to come forward before we actually take a final vote, okay, if that's possible. Are you agreeable to that? Is there a timeline on this?
To my knowledge, it would be debated in the fall. I did send council a copy of the legislation and the link. If you need more time to review it, that's fair.
Yeah. Has the administration seen the bill?
Ms. Hawryluk?
Through your worship, I have not seen the bill. I'll speak with my staff tomorrow.
Okay. I just think that before I say I want to vote for a bill, that people who understand how it fits with what we're doing should at least have a read, so.
Yeah, thank you for that, Councillor Young. I'm going to suggest, Councillor Stevens, you wouldn't mind having this tabled to the next council meeting, because I haven't seen it either. And it sounds like it's laudable in terms of its objectives. I don't have any issue with that at all, but I don't know what's in the bill. I don't know the financial implications of it for the city or anyone else. So, it's important to have all information to make an informed decision. So, I don't recall seeing the email that had the legislation on that. It's a private member's bill, and those are slower to move forward than government-sponsored legislation. I know that to be sure. So, if you would be agreeable to have this tabled to the next meeting of council, you could have that discussion.
Fair enough. Yep.
Would you like to refer it to the next meeting of council?
Yes, refer to the August 27th meeting of council.
Before you do that, is there anybody else who wants to speak on it? Okay, motion to refer it to the next meeting of council. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much, Councillor Stephen. That's good. There's two notices of motion, one from Councillor Hawkins, then another from Councillor Hawkins, Stevens, and Bresciani. Motion number 9, if you want to read just the, not the whereas clause, but the actual clauses themselves. Councillor Hawkins?
Thank you very much. So you're asking me to read the resolved clause,
yes.
Correct?
Yeah.
Therefore, be it resolved that 1, City Administration prepare a report for Regina Planning Commission and subsequent consideration by City Council to outline regulatory options and recommendations with respect to the advisability of adopting regulations requiring soft landscaping on 1 and 2 unit dwellings in new greenfield developments, such landscaping to apply to all front or side yards bordering on any street or public pathway, details of what landscaping regulations might contain, and the options available for enforcing such a regulation, including the option of an enforcement by private industry, developers, and builders. 2, consultation with Regina Home Builders Association be undertaken in the preparation of this report. And 3, this report be made available for consideration by Regina Planning Commission and City Council no later than the end of December 2018 in order to permit any new landscaping regulations, should they be adopted, to be in place by the end of the second quarter of 2019.
So no debating the motion, simply is to speak to the resolution. Thank you, Councillor Hawkins. The next motion, report 10. Either one of the 3 councillors can stand up to speak to this one. Councillor Bresciani?
Thank
Just
you.
the resolutions themselves, not the whereas clauses.
Okay, yeah. Thank you. On behalf of Councillor Stevens, Councillor Hawkins, and myself, protect Wascana Park from commercial development. Therefore, be resolved that City Council commit to protecting Wascana Park from the future commercial development and that is not directly intended to serve the needs of or benefit those using the park. 2, a letter be sent on behalf of the City of Regina from Mayor Michael Fougere to the Government of Saskatchewan and the Provincial Capital Commission opposing future commercial development in Wascana Park. And that 3, that the City of Regina urgently requests this item to be put on the Provincial Capital Commission agenda to commence public consultation process that addresses the future development, stewardship, and the governance of Wascana Park.
Thank you, Councillor Bresciani. All that's left now, of course, is the bylaws and related reports. We have one bylaw. Councillor Stevens. 18-42, the Waste Management Amendment Bylaw, 2018.
I move, seconded by Councillor Young, that bylaw 2018-42 be introduced and read a first time.
All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor Findura, that bylaw 2018-42 be read a second time.
All those in favor?
One question.
Okay.
The bylaw lists in an appendix 3 fees. I'm just wondering, are those fees comparable to current fees? Are they an increase in the current fees? What is the relation between the proposed fees and the fees that exist now? In some cases, no fees exist, I think.
Ms. Gizmo?
Through your worship, the first daily recycling fee refers to the fee that is already currently on the utility bill. The two additional fees refer to an option to get a second cart. They're basically the difference is the two different sizes of carts that they could ask for.
Thank you. That answers the question.
Thank you. I'll call the question on all those in favor. Opposed, carried.
I move, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell, that council hereby consents to bylaw 2018-42 going to a third reading at this meeting.
All those in favor? Opposed, that's carried unanimously.
I move, seconded by Councillor Flagel, that bylaw 2018-42 be read a third time.
All those in favor? Opposed, that's carried. Motion to adjourn. So, Councillor Hawkins, Councillor Bryce, all those in favor? Opposed, carried. Thank you very much, everybody, and have a great evening.